I'm not going to use that. Before Mary leaves her, and I have to get back, as she mentioned, but I'm very, very grateful for Mary. I love her very much. She's my best friend, and it brings a great joy to the campaign trail when she's with us. She was with us all of last week, most of this week, and she can't always be with us because, as she mentioned, we have 2 teenage daughters, one of whom is 18, one of whom is 15. One of them drives, and they both like boys. And so they need parental, supervision and oversight. Right, Anna? Yeah. And so I'm delighted, honey, that for you, the energy and the enthusiasm that you bring to the campaign is wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Now, I love coming to Iowa for lots of different reasons. There's a lot of overlap between Iowa and Minnesota. Iowa is one of the few places in the country where I can tell my corny Ole and Lena jokes and people still appreciate them somewhat. So you got to know, of course, about the relationship with Ole and Lena. It was on the hard times. It was on the rocks. There was bickering. There was arguing. Ole and Lena were going back and forth, and Ole thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to get some counseling to get this thing back on track. So Ole goes and sees the counselor. And he's telling the counselor, we've got problems in the relationship. We're arguing all the time. The counselor says, oh, Ole, I mean, my goodness, we can fix this easily. All you need to do is get some exercise, clear your head. So Ole, here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk 2 miles every day for 2 weeks, 14 days, and things will get better. They'll be just fine. And Ole said, okay, I will. And so out the door he went. 2 weeks goes by, the counselor picks up the phone to call Ole to check in on him. And he says, Ole, he gets his Ole on his cell phone. He says, Ole, how are things going in the relationship with Lena? Are they getting better? And Ole says, well, how the heck would I know? I'm 28 miles away from home. That's just a little story about things drifting off course in that relationship, and it's analogous to our country drifting off course. You and I know that there are some foundational values and principles and perspectives that have made this the greatest nation the world's ever known. And we now have a president that has led this country in a very misguided and dangerous and wrong direction. I'm running for President of the United States because, like you, I love America. I've got the leadership skills and ability and record of results and values and ideas to lead it to a better place. And I want to talk to you about that tonight, and I appreciate you all being here, taking your precious time. But before we talk about how we move forward, I think it's also important to take a few minutes to remember how we got into this mess. One of the reasons and one of the ways we got into this mess is because during the last presidential election cycle, the Democrats in Iowa and Democrats more broadly across the country thought it was a good idea to put Barack Obama in the White House. Now, what have we learned from that experience? Well, one thing we should have learned from that experience is this. He wasn't prepared for the job. We put somebody in the White House who had been a community organizer, who had been a college professor, who had been in the United States Senate long enough to have a cup of coffee before it got cold, and then we made him President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, and the leader of the free world. That's not the right credentials and experience for somebody in that position. He wasn't ready for the job. So one of the points I want to make with you tonight is I think it's important for Iowa to expect and for America to expect that the next President of the United States, particularly in these most challenging times, is going to have run something, going to have done something, been an executive in charge of a large organization with a public component to it and driven it and led it to results under difficult circumstances. That's the kind of experience I think we want in the person who's going to be the next president. What else have we learned from the Barack Obama experience? Well, we've learned some other things. Another thing we've learned is he made a lot of promises, gave great speeches. Remember, boy, did he give good speeches. Soaring oratory, big stadium speeches. You know, he's like the elixir salesman coming through town and selling you the elixir. And boy, did he speak well. But guess what? The speeches don't put food on the table, do they? They don't put gas in the tank or pay the mortgage or create jobs. So we've had enough of the big speeches. Had enough of the hollow rhetoric. We've had enough of the unfulfilled and broken promises. Now we need a leader and a president who's going to deliver. And this isn't about speeches. It's about putting our shoulders back and our heads down and rolling up our sleeves and driving forward and doing the tough work to get this country back on track, the country that we love. And lastly, we now have a president who broke almost every promise he made to America. And I won't go through them all because there's so many. But let me give you a couple of examples. You remember when Barack Obama stood here in Iowa on the night of the Iowa caucuses, and he said that we're going to fix health care in America? And as a candidate, he was opposed to the individual mandate. He said he would promise to do health care reform with the Republicans. He would focus on cost containment as the main goal. And then he got elected and went to Washington, D.C. and did just the exact opposite. He put down the throats of the country one of the most misguided, most partisan pieces of legislation in the modern history of the country. And I think Obamacare should be repealed in its entirety.
Amen.
So, now we got a couple other things we got to do. And now look, I could go on with the President Obama contrast and the challenges that he's visited upon the country. I'll give you one more, though, that I think is really important because of today's debt ceiling vote. You know, we've got a country that is drowning in debt. It's drowning in deficit. And Barack Obama looked the American people in the eye after he became president, after he knew the full measure of the economic collapse, after he knew the magnitude of it. And you know what he said? He said, I'll cut the deficit in half during my first term. The President of the United States said, I'll cut the deficit in half during my first term. You know what he did? Not even the end of his first term, he tripled it. So those are some examples of the kinds of lessons that we've learned, the trail of broken promises that we've seen, the rhetoric, the hollow rhetoric that we've seen under this president, that we now need to learn the lessons from and make sure that we move to a better place. And I'll lead that effort. I won't go through it all because I want to leave time for questions, but let me give you a couple of key things by way of example that we're going to have to focus on and fix. Number one, we've got to get this economy moving. And I came to Iowa and announced my campaign and said there's going to be some hard truths in all of this and talked about what we need to do to cut spending, and that's part of it too. But we also need to grow the economy. And guess how you grow the economy? Well, you don't do what Barack Obama wants, which is centralized planning. What you want is private markets and free markets and the private sector growing. And he doesn't understand that or appreciate it. And look, this is not rocket science. It's not that hard. If you want to grow jobs, you ask the people who provide the jobs. And what they say every day all over this country, as loud and as plainly as anybody can hear, is this. They say, Governor, get the government off my back. Some talk about taxes. Some talk about regulations. Some talk about energy costs. Some talk about health care costs and down the list. But they all say the load is too heavy. You got to make it lighter, not heavier. You got to give us confidence, not uncertainty. You got to give us encouragement, not discouragement. And we've got to make America more competitive. Now, I gave the most specific, most detailed, most pro-jobs, most pro-investment proposal of any candidate in the race by far. At the University of Chicago, Barack Obama's former place of employment. I just gave it a few weeks ago. It's on the website at Pawlenty.com. I won't re-give it here for you tonight, but know that it calls for dramatic tax reductions, dramatic tax simplification, dramatic incentives to get jobs growing through a better, more lighter regulatory system, repealing health care and doing it the right way like we did it in Minnesota, making sure we have an American energy plan that features more American energy, not more Middle Eastern energy. And it goes on from there to talk about what we need to do to get the economy fixed more broadly. But one other thing, we also got to get the spending under control. The country, of course, is focused on the debt ceiling debate. And look, the debt ceiling is like a symptom of a larger problem. So if you have a temperature on a thermometer that you've taken, and you have a high temperature and it is around for an hour or two, you might not think much of it. But if it's around for a number of days or a number of weeks or a number of months, you know you got a problem. And you don't just give it an aspirin, you don't just take an aspirin and hope that the problem will resolve itself. You got to find what's underneath that, what's the real problem. And this debt ceiling, like that, is just a symptom of the real problems. And they've been brewing for decades. But Barack Obama's made them exponentially worse. And the problem is this country's spending and our federal government is out of control. And to give you just a couple measures of it, They're spending at the federal level $40,000 a second that they don't have. That's $144 million an hour that they don't have. If you're here in this room for an hour tonight, the federal government will spend $144 million that they don't have. Every hour, every day, every week, every month. It is out of control. They're running a Ponzi scheme of the highest order. If they were in the private sector, they'd be indicted. We can't let that happen anymore. Just because we followed Greece into democracy doesn't mean we should follow them into bankruptcy. So we need to get this moving. And I'll just close and tell you, we know how to do this. This country is the greatest nation the world has ever known. We got a lot of hard work ahead of us, but the way forward is not particularly complex. We can look back and see the incredible greatness of this country, the exceptional greatness of this country, understand the values and principles and approaches that made it work, and harvest those, and bring them forward to the challenges and opportunities of our time. And here's the essence of it. If you look around the world and say, why America? Why are we the greatest nation the world's ever known? Is it because we're the largest country in terms of population? No, we're not. Is it because we're the cheapest country? No, we're not, although we need to be more competitive. Well, we're not the biggest and we're not the cheapest. Why are we the greatest? We're the greatest because we're the freest country the world's ever known. And this is not some throwaway word by a politician. This is one of the most important concepts and foundations and pillars of our country. And when people are free, they can dream as they see fit. And I've lived the American dream, as Mary mentioned. They can create as they see fit. They can worship. They can design. They can invent. They can innovate. They can associate. They can have their own American dream without somebody saying, no, your options are limited, or you can only do as we say, or you can only do as much as we say. And what's unique about America is this human spirit and human potential that has within us people saying we can do anything. Now, when government comes into our lives and says, wait a minute, not so fast. We're going to make it more difficult for you. We're going to make it more expensive for you. We're going to make it slower. We're going to discourage you. We're going to make it more challenging. We're going to tax you more. We're going to bring more stuff into government. We're going to take over what used to be done by families or by charity or by churches or by philanthropy. Or worse yet, they come in and say, we're going to take over more and more and more of the private market and nudge aside entrepreneurs or discourage them. And when they do that, they not only grow their budgets, they not only grow their footprint, they do something else that's equally corrosive to our country. They weigh down and discourage and begin to take away the American spirit. And you know this is happening. And sometimes it happens so incremental, a lot of people don't even notice. But when you add it up over all the years and all the decades, what you see is a federal government that has creeped into our lives in ways that have so weighed down and discouraged the American spirit that we have too many of our fellow citizens saying, I don't think the future may not be as good as the past. That's not the American way. It's not the America I grew up in. You know, when my mom died and my dad passed away, or was unemployed, I should say, for a while after she passed away, the life didn't look so good for us, but I always believed if I played by the rules and worked hard, and the future would be bright. We need to make sure we have that kind of hope and optimism. The brilliance of this country is not in our bureaucracy, it's in our people. It's in the American spirit, and we just need to unleash that, and we will again be a great nation. I understand that. Barack Obama doesn't, and when I'm elected President of the United States, I will guarantee you we will lead this country to a dramatically better place. Thanks for coming tonight. I look forward to your questions. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
I just came back from Charleston, South Carolina, and saw the beautiful, wonderful new Boeing plant down there that is being built. And the unions have done something legally that I don't understand, but to shut it down and not allow the people in South Carolina to work there as a right to work state. What can be done about that? We talk about we want jobs.
Yep.
We want American jobs. We want good paying jobs. We don't want countries outside the United States to get this kind of work. What can be done about it?
God bless you for asking. That is a terrific question, and it is a symbol of what's wrong with Barack Obama's government and Barack Obama's leadership and Barack Obama's philosophy. This lady is raising this question of the Boeing Corporation, which has operations in the state of Washington, and they want to expand, add to their jobs and economic activity by starting a plant in South Carolina. It essentially does not take away what's going on in Washington, it adds to it. And now you have an arm of the federal government, the National Labor Relations Board, coming in and telling a private American company where they can and can't do business. This isn't the Soviet Union in the 1950s. We don't live in Russia. We don't live in China. The government doesn't tell us what to do. We tell them what to do. And then I hope it scares and concerns and angers every one of you in this room that we have a federal government that's looking at a private business and telling them where they can and can't do business within the United States. That's ridiculous. And I was one of the first and strongest voices to criticize that. Say on this issue, though, and all others, one thing I want to share with you is, who's really done this stuff? All the Republican candidates are going to sound, or I should say many of the candidates are going to sound basically the same on many of the issues. You know, if another candidate were standing here tonight in Sioux City, they'd say, look, I'm for reducing spending. I'm for reducing taxes. I'm for school reform that features parental empowerment and accountability and choice. And they'll say that I'm pro-life, and I'm pro-traditional marriage, and I'm pro-appointing conservative justices, and I'm for public employee pension reform, and the like. And so you might listen to that and say, well, what's the difference between all these candidates? Well, one that I hope you'll consider is who's actually done it. Because like we learned with Barack Obama, we don't need any more speeches. We've heard that. People are tired of politicians flapping their jaws. They want results. They want America to be healed and to move forward. So we're traveling around the state, 1,100 miles last week and about the same this week, talking about not rhetoric, but results. And if you look at my record in Minnesota, here's what you'll see. Spending from historic highs to historic lows. Taxes cut net over 8 years, even though we had the effects of 2 recessions. One of the first states in the nation to offer a performance pay rather than seniority pay to teachers statewide. We did public employee pension and compensation reform before it was the cool and popular and in thing to do. We did it years ago. We did health care reform the right way. No individual mandates, no government takeovers. I appointed the first majority conservative Supreme Court in the history, recent history, maybe the whole history of my state. We did welfare reform and immigration reform, and we advanced dramatically the pro-life cause. I was the co-author of the Traditional Marriage or the Defense of Marriage Act when I was in the legislature. I share all of that with you is because you're going to have to decide. And I hope one of the things that you take into consideration is, are these people just talking about it, or did they do it? And I've done it. I think that's important. Sir?
Yeah. Well, with Bush we had the great decider, and with Obama we have the great divider. And one quality that I see in you, if you want to comment on that, is his way of dividing people up into groups and then pitting one against the other. And I think it's very important that we have somebody who can agree or disagree either way, and try to work on the problems without excluding anyone. And from all of your vetoes, you obviously, are no pushover because you're demanding some responsibility with the budget, but at the same time, you didn't make enemies doing it, or at least personal enemies doing it.
Well, this is a really important point. And look, any leader, particularly in difficult times, is going to have supporters and detractors. So you can't, just look at it from a popularity standpoint. But I governed, got elected and re-elected in probably one of the most hostile political environments for a conservative in the country. And again, all this is the same kind of thing. Everybody's going to say who's a candidate, I'm the one who can go into these swing states like Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Ohio and the like and win those states and win over independent voters and bring them to our side, not by acting like a Democrat, but by convincing them to join our team. Everybody's going to say they can do that. I did it. I got elected and reelected. Now look, you also as a leader have to have more than 1 year. So Ronald Reagan's a great role model of mine. I suspect he is for most of you too. Look at his characteristics. You know, as a person, optimistic, hopeful, positive, decent, civil, but strong as a leader. So you can be both decent and civil and kind, but also be strong. And he and other leaders taught that. You got to have more than 1 year. So there are times, and a lot of times, where I fought ferociously with the Democrats in the Minnesota legislature. I never had a Republican legislature, by the way. It's not like some states where you just rubber stamping the great work of a conservative legislature. I mean, we had a lot of battles, and I won most of them. So some of it was drawing lines in the sand. First government shutdown in 150 years, record for vetoes, taking more money out of the budget, using executive authority than all the other governors combined. But there are also times where we can work together across the way. But it starts with making sure they have respect. Because if they think they can roll you, they will. And I think that for us, one of the smartest things we could do is put boundaries around our politicians that we send to Washington, D.C. Some of you may have invisible fences. I think we need some invisible fencing around Congress. And the form it should take, and maybe visible fencing, is we got to put limits around what they can do. Because I don't believe anymore that we can send politicians to Washington, D.C., and that most of them will behave over time in terms of living within their means and getting the spending under control. I don't believe that anymore. So what I think we have to do as a country is propose and pass and put into law a constitutional amendment to require them, like 49 of the 50 states, to have a balanced budget. They also should live under the other rules that people have to live under. The tax code is a mess. And I think, seriously, one of the best things we could do is require members of Congress and all federal officials to do their own tax returns without the help of a lawyer or tax accountant or tax preparer, and certify under perjury that they did it themselves. And let them experience every year the mindless, expensive, intimidating, difficult, complicated exercise that is trying to fill out your own tax returns. And I bet if they had to do that a few years in a row, we'd have a very different tax system after the folks who put it on us have a chance to experience fully themselves. Yes?
Well, you've already said what the balanced budget would be one of your focuses for trimming the government spending. What would be the next and most important ways in which you trim the government that has grown so big?
That's a great question, which is, you know, what are the things you're going to do more specifically to trim government spending? When I launched the campaign, I said, look, it's just time to tell people the truth. Yeah, they'll either accept it or they won't. It'll be like the Jack Nicholson election in the movie A Few Good Men. Remember that scene? You can't handle the truth? Well, I think the American people can handle the truth. If you give it to them respectfully and you show them some constructive solutions. So here's where the money goes federally. They take in about $2.2 trillion a year. They spend $3.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion deficit last year, this year, and $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see. Where does the money go? You look at a pie chart of federal outlays, circular pie chart, and you color the red part, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, interest on the national debt, and a few other entitlement programs. That red part is already over the halfway line. And at the rate at which it's growing, it's going to be over the 3/4 line within 15 years. Almost all the rest is defense. So if you believe what I believe about defense, that it needs to be maintained, it can be, you know, reprioritized and made more efficient and the like, but it needs to be maintained. The main way forward is the red part. There's a little sliver in there, by the way, for everything else, foreign aid, Department of Education, Department of Commerce, parks, prisons, all that stuff. And we should focus on them too, but know that that's a relatively small part of the pie, particularly in the not too distant future. So we have to fix the red part. A lot of people don't want to talk about the red part. I'll talk about the red part. On Social Security. and Medicare and Medicaid, you can't find the President of the United States. This is the most pressing challenge of our time financially. And you can't find him anywhere. He doesn't have a specific proposal. I don't think. I can't find it. We shouldn't have to play come out wherever you are with the President of the United States. He should be leading on these issues. We shouldn't have to look to a congressman from Wisconsin, although God bless him for his courage for leading this debate. The President should be willing to step forward and take the hits for putting specifics on the table. So I'm offering a prize for anyone in this room, anyone in Iowa, anyone across the country who can actually find Barack Obama's specific proposal to reform Social Security that he has said in public, or Medicaid, or Medicare. If you can find it, even on Google, I will buy you dinner, or make you dinner. A menu of my choice. Or, if you'd like, I will mow your grass 1 week. However, it's limited to 1 acre, ma'am. I heard that 10 acre. 1 acre maximum. Or if you play hockey, I'll have a pickup hockey game, and I'll make sure you score some goals on your team that you score. I'm serious. If anybody can find it, that's the prize. Now, as to what I would do, number one, anybody on Social Security, we made a promise to you. You counted on that promise. We're going to keep our promise to you. Anybody on the program now, no changes. Anybody coming up on eligibility for the program, no changes. But we are going to make some changes for the next group. We have to look them in the eye and tell them the truth. So my daughter's not here, but I'd love to tell her, Anna, for your group, people coming into the workforce, your retirement age is going up. And there's no way we can avoid it. But we're going to give you a couple decades or more of notice, and we'll do it gradually. But life expectancies have gone way up, so we have to adjust the retirement age a little bit gradually over time. I think we can get a majority of Americans to support that. 2, I don't like means testing. I think it breeds class warfare, discussion, and tension. We want to reward success in America. But we got all bad choices to pick from here, so here's one that's least bad. In the future, we're going to say to people who are wealthy, we'll give you your Social Security benefits, obviously, but we're not going to give you the cost of living adjustment if you're wealthy. If you're middle income or lower income, you will, but you won't get that annual upward adjustment. And then finally, for new people coming into the system, you can choose to stay in the traditional system or take individual accounts, whichever you like. Not forced on you, you can choose. So those things will dramatically improve the trajectory of Social Security. Medicaid, we've got to shut off the autopilot spending increases. We have to make Congress decide what they can afford each year on the program and end the dual management between the federal government, the state government, block grant, the whole thing to the states, with only one requirement. They use it for health care for the poor. Medicare is a much longer answer. People's eyes glaze over, and I don't want to hold you here all night. But we're going to have to improve Medicare. Again, if you're on the program now, no changes. If you're near eligibility for the program, no changes. But for the future generation, we're going to have to make some changes. Some of those changes are going to have to be these. We're going to have to start paying providers differently. We can't just pay them only for the volumes of procedures they perform. We want to know whether those procedures are leading to better health and whether it's working. So we want to pay for better health, not just volume. That's one thing. 2 is you've got to get incentives into the hands of consumers to make wise choices in a marketplace about their health care. And so for most of us, we go to the hospital, doctor, clinic. We don't know what really it costs. It's hard to find out. We don't know really what the quality measurements are. And we don't have much financial incentive oftentimes to try to make the best choice because we think somebody else is mostly paying for it. And so we have to try to get good information about price and quality in people's hands and give them financial incentives to use it wisely.
Can I just ask one more question? This is never talked about, and why is it that we don't have FICA coming out of somebody who makes $5 million a year? They expect to get their Social Security, but yet they paid such a small portion into Social Security. Now, people were getting their FICA taken out of not only to $109,000, which is the majority of the middle class, but it went all the way up to earned income. We would not have a problem with Social Security.
Well, but keep in mind the benefits are also capped. So you know, the amount they pay in is capped, but also the
Well, how about going up a
benefits
little
are
bit
capped.
more then? Because
Well, that would be a
it's
tax
small
increase, yeah,
percentage.
that'd be a tax increase, and I think the better way forward is the things I described. So I know that President Obama and others have proposed what you're proposing.
Well,
Sir?
In the past, anyhow, Iowa's done a pretty good job of driving businesses out of the state, and I don't know, maybe until you took over, Minnesota was doing some of that, but this country as a whole is experiencing more deficits, it appears, as far as trade goes, because a lot of that work is in other countries. So if you could address that, I'd just like to know what your thoughts are.
Sure will.
Trade deficits.
Well, again, on all these issues, I got a record. You know, I won't go into all, but I'm for free trade, but I'm not for being a chump. And I've been all over the world for lots of reasons, trips to Iraq, Afghanistan, the Middle East, trade missions to Asia, South America, and the like. But if the American worker in America has fair rules, we can compete against anybody. But I want to shoot it to you straight. We've got a lot of countries who break the rules and cheat. And we got to have the strength to call them on it. So now when you talk about strength, we need to make sure we're coming at them from a position of strength when we have these negotiations and call them to account. Who do you think is buying all of America's debt? Or I shouldn't say all of it, but the majority chunk of it. Ever told off your banker? So one of the things we need to do is get our financial house in order so we have the strength and they respect us from a position of strength in these negotiations. If you want to see an interesting account in Hank Paulson's book during the economic crisis of 2008, guess what happened according to his book? Russia, Mr. Putin, the people that Obama was trying to, you know, is now trying to reset our relations with, goes to China and tries to convince them to simultaneously pull down their positions in the American bond markets to further deliver pain to us at a time when we were most economically exposed. According to the book, China declined in that moment. They could have. Russia tried to go ahead with it on their own. There's a lot of significance to that story, but the point I want to leave you with is we got to have a country that stands strong and stands up for America, and when people cheat and don't play by the rules, we have to call them on it. So I've been to China numerous times, and it sort of works like this. If I'm the Chinese government, she wants to come to work, open a business in China, and it's of strategic interest to China, they want to know, where's your Chinese plant going to be? They want to know, how many Chinese employees are you going to employ? They want to know how much Chinese capital equipment are you going to buy? They want to know if you've got any intellectual property, because if you do and they're interested in it, they want you to have a local Chinese technology partner. And as a condition of accessing their 1.5 billion consumers, they'll require you to do business with this technology partner. And guess what? They don't protect intellectual property laws. And so if she steals your technology and she's doing business against you with your former senior management team down the street 5 years from now, you're out of luck. Now, what if we turn the tables on them? You know, we wouldn't do this, but what if we said, oh, you want to access our 300+ million affluent consumers in America? Where's your American plan? How many Americans are you going to be employing? How much American capital equipment you're going to be buying? Oh, do you have some technology? Because we'd like you to meet your American technology partner. And by the way, if we steal it, our courts don't enforce the laws. Imagine if we did that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that goes on. And again, I'm for free trade, but I'm not for being a chump. So let's be strong on these issues. Sir.
Obama said he's wanting to repeal the DOMA, and it appears that Congress has got some push there, and it appears to me that we may be like Canada soon, where our religious opinions are illegal and criminal. What would you do if you were president to kind of change the tide?
Sure. Paul, did you give me the... well, we'll do this and maybe one other quick one and be done. But first of all, these are really important questions and points that you raised, sir. And I want you to know I'm both an economic conservative and a social and cultural conservative as well. and I'll start with your last point. We're a nation founded under God. And we need to be a nation that turns toward God, not away from God. And this is not the words of somebody just seeking office. This is in our founding documents. And it is the perspective of the people who founded this nation that it was important to honor, acknowledge God, and put it in the founding documents. So it's not a politically incorrect statement to say these things. In 49 of the 50 states, they have language like Minnesota. You open up the Constitution, in the first paragraph, in the first sentence, it says, "We, the people of Minnesota, grateful to God for our civil and religious liberties." And then it goes on from there to talk about the importance of perpetuating those blessings to future generations. And of course that and all of the eloquent examples in our national founding documents reinforce this point. The privileges and liberties that we're given come from our Creator God. They don't come from our bureaucrat. They don't come from Congress. It doesn't say, in the Declaration we're endowed by our congressman. It doesn't say we're endowed by our county commissioner. It says we're endowed by our Creator. And down the list. Now, as to the issue of traditional marriage, I've been a strong and unwavering advocate of doing everything we can to protect traditional marriage and define it as between a man and a woman. I was the co-author of the legislation in Minnesota to define marriage as between a man and a woman, the Defense of Marriage Act. As president, I can guarantee you I will stand firm on all levels, at all times, for all purposes, with that goal in mind. We have to make sure that marriage, traditional marriage, remains elevated in our society, legally, culturally, and otherwise. It is not the same as all other domestic relationships. I just don't accept the premise by some that they say it is. It's not. We need to keep it elevated. And you should also know on these issues, I appointed 4 conservative justices to the Minnesota Supreme Court. Again, everybody's going to say they'll appoint conservative justices. I did. And they're been viewed as probably the best state conservative Supreme Court justices in the country by the groups who evaluate that. By the way, one of the justices I appointed was the former lawyer for Lawyers for Life, and down the list. Now, I will also just tell you, in Minnesota, the pro-life community is giving me extremely high marks. The one conservative publication said that I was probably the most pro-life candidate of any candidate in the race, given the results I had as Minnesota governor. Positive Alternatives to Abortion Act I proposed and signed, women's right to know, fetal pain. We have abortion rates at the lowest level in 35 years in Minnesota. Just got good news yesterday that it dropped another 7% last year, and the pro-life organizations in Minnesota said that was largely attributable to the policy changes that we made when I was governor. So I won't disappoint you on these issues, sir, I guarantee you that. We'll do one more and then we'll go. Go ahead.
Well, this is a quick one. Are you gonna have czars?
No.
You're gonna get rid of the czars.
That's
Are you
right.
gonna appoint any others?
Well,
should
that's
be
a great
good-
question. Yeah, it's really frustrating because President Obama didn't want to have certain appointees to go through the approval process. So he informally calls them czars. And first of all, the term is weird. And second of all, we have a system of checks and balances. You're supposed to go through the system if you're going to be one of the decision makers and leaders of our country. We don't have side deals with, czars.
Right.
So that practice will end when I'm president. And let me just again say thanks for coming tonight. I know your time is precious. And I want to just ask for your help. The age straw poll is coming up. And for Iowa, it's important that Iowa not just be first, but that you be right. And that means having somebody who is catapulted out of Iowa who can actually be the party's nominee. And that's going to mean, first of all, uniting the party. And as you know, the conservative coalition consists of economic conservatives and social conservatives and Tea Party libertarian conservatives and a few other types. Now, one person can be in more than one of those categories. But if you think about some of the other candidates running for president on the Republican side, they primarily appeal to one of those buckets, but not all three, or maybe a bucket and a half, but not all three. I genuinely and authentically have the record and the perspective that will unite that whole coalition. And the main way we're going to goof this up is to nominate the wrong candidate. Barack Obama's numbers nationally aren't very good. But if you look at Barack Obama's numbers amongst independents in swing states that are going to decide the election, his numbers are awful. This election is winnable. If it were held today, we'd not only win, we'd win comfortably if we have the right candidate. And if we put a candidate forward that the rest of the party and the rest of the country says, I don't think so, we're going to miss a golden opportunity. So I ask you, and I know you will because you take this seriously in Iowa, you've got the privilege and the responsibility of launching the rocket first. And before you fuel up the rocket and blast it off out of here, please make sure it can get all the way to the destination, because it's not much of a consolation prize to say we were first, but we were wrong. So please think this through. And again, what I bring to the table is executive experience, a record of results, not just speeches and talking about these things, but getting it done on all the issues facing this country. I believe that the party will be well served and the nation will be well served when all of us working together get behind my campaign and get this country back on track. So I hope you'll come to Ames and help us. If you haven't signed up, there's some postcards in the back. Thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Sir, would you like to sign for more information about the strike?
She's okay.
Great, good for you. And you? If there's some, you take a sheet back. Yes. More information. Go ahead, let yourself heal. I said, go and let yourself heal. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks for taking the time. How you doing? Of course. Thanks for coming. Okay.
I was wondering if you wanted to just because I asked about
Yeah, but you seem just very educated about politics.
everyone who asked about that.
I'm Jeff.
Oh,
yeah. Nice to meet you. Yeah. It's Rob right there. Thank you for coming. One of my
Sure.